Welcome to all.
Well, thank you, Richard. And I want to begin on that note of gratitude. So this is technically the second presentation I've given for an Alpena community. I read in Alpena some months ago at the library, and that was a lovely experience. But this is kind of an exciting new venue for me because this is my first official Zoom event as an author. I've, of course, gone to several meetings through my work at West Shore Community College, but this is my first time presenting as an author online. So I'm excited, and I also apologize if I'm rusty because I'm learning just like everybody else in this day and age. So I want to thank Richard for setting this all up. I've been corresponding with him for a little while now over email, and he's answered some questions. And Florence is not here today, but she was the person who invited me and encouraged me to present. So I'd like to also thank her, but mostly and most importantly, thank you all for being here this morning. I am a first-time author, so my career is hopefully taking off, but I'm new to all of this, and so every reader, every attendee, I'm just so thankful for their time. So I want to begin by talking a little bit about the structure of today's presentation so you know what to expect. I'm going to begin by talking for about 10 to 15 minutes about what Alpena means to me, the role that this town plays in the memoir, because it is featured prominently in Welcome to Replica Dodge, and more specifically, the way my attitude changed toward the town over several years, starting when I was about 17, and then to about 24, 25. So when you think about Alpena in a nutshell and how my attitude changed toward Alpena, which it went from relatively negative to overwhelmingly positive over a series of years. It's also a really good way to start talking about the book overall and the book's larger themes overall. And so I'm also going to touch on that in my introduction. I'm going to read for a pretty minimal amount of time because I think it's a very different experience reading in front of a group of people versus meeting with people over Zoom and trying to conduct a reading that way. So I'm going to read for maybe only 6 or 7 minutes after my introduction, and then I want to get to your questions. And any question that I don't, for whatever reason, fully answer, or you have to go to an appointment like Kathleen and just don't have time to ask, please, you're welcome to email me. My email is natalieruthjoynton@gmail.com, and I will be happy to continue the conversation from there. My last little, well, I guess you could consider it a first-time author's plea, is that if you have read Welcome to Replica Dodge and enjoyed it, please consider leaving me a positive review on Amazon.com. Obviously, Amazon.com is the place where most people get their books if they're buying them online at this point in time. And it really helps. Each positive review makes the book itself more visible to more people online. So if you read it and you had a good experience reading the book, please consider leaving me a positive review on Amazon. Okay, so I think that concludes how this is going to work part of my presentation. So I'll get right into the major themes of the book and specifically how Alpena ties into and is really symbolic of some of the larger themes that are happening in Welcome to Replica Dodge. And I'm going to begin by saying something that sounds potentially crazy considering the average age of this group, but I turned 34 this year, which at least to me seems pretty old. And I've reached a certain age, and so in middle age basically, And once you reach that certain age, I think there are places, probably for everyone, when you return to them, that it's almost as if you're stepping back into a painting. Because the memories that you have of that place are so sweet. And maybe some of the most pleasant memories that you have, that it's almost like an impressionistic experience returning to those places. Everything seems full of this natural light and natural beauty. You're remembering really good times with good friends. You're maybe thinking, reminiscing about your own early youth and all of the freedom that goes along with that early youth. You know, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I am the mother of two small-ish children. They used to be very small, but now they're growing up a little bit. My daughter is 6 years old and my son is 3, almost 4. And as any parent knows, especially when those babies come along, a lot of your own time disappears. So my husband and I lead very full lives, very busy lives, and it's sweet to remember those times and places when I was freer and young. And of course, it always helps if this place that you return to that reminds you of stepping into a painting also includes a little bit of romance. And for me, it was actually a lot of romance. And maybe, you know, maybe you've stayed in touch with that person, maybe things worked out, maybe they didn't, but regardless, it's part of those sweet memories you hold of a place. And so this is what Alpena is to me now. I see it as one of the sweetest places on earth to return to, and we still have family there. My husband Joe's family is still rooted in Alpena. But, and this is a big but, it was not always that way. When I was a freshman at the University of Houston, 17 years old, I believe this was in 2002, late 2002, because my father accepted the presidency position and was up in Alpena, I believe, in early 2003. So I was attending University of Houston. I had graduated from high school early, but I wasn't quite ready to be out from under my parents and completely. I was accepted to several different universities, but purposefully chose to go to the university closest to where my parents lived because I relished the idea, and of course I often went home 15 to 20 minutes north of Houston to do my laundry, to see my family on the weekends, and that's right where my comfort level was at 17 years old. So when my parents announced that they were going to be leaving Houston, which is a hot, eclectic, highly diverse city. It's got a population of about 2.5 million. The most recent census, it was determined that Houston is actually America's most diverse, ethnically and racially diverse city in our whole nation. So it's a wonderful place to grow up. People often ask me why I don't have a Southern accent, and it's because the city that I come from in Texas is so highly multicultural in so many different ways. So I reaped all of the riches that Houston had to offer growing up. And I'm talking about things like tuba recitals at Rice University, or the symphony, the ballet, and my parents made sure that I had access to all of that. So when my dad announced that they were leaving all of this for Alpena, I had never heard of the place. And so in melodramatic fashion, that was quite typical of a 17-year-old, I was pretty determined to really dislike anything that my parents made or did in Alpena. I didn't like that they moved there. I had a decent dose of anger and resentment, and also loneliness, because here's the other thing that would happen is that when I was on those early days at the University of Houston, after my parents would move away, sometimes I would just drive north of the city to see this house where my parents had brought me home as a newborn. I had only lived in one house my whole life. And, you know, here was the place that they had brought me home from the hospital. They had been married in the living room. My mom, to commemorate that marriage, had planted what I think was a sycamore tree right outside of my bedroom. And that sycamore tree had grown up beautiful and strong and had shaded us from the worst of the Texas heat. And so it was hard for me to go back to that home and know that there was somebody else living there. So all of that is the baggage that I brought with me to Alpena. But something happened early in Alpena that changed my life, and it completely upended and significantly softened my understanding of this town, this place that I had never heard of. And that is, and this gets back to the romance part, I met Joe Grochowski. Joe Grochowski is Richard and Patty's son, and he had grown up in and around Alpena. And in many ways, Joe is a product, and so he's a character in the book. In real life, he's my husband, but he's also this symbol in the book of kind of what the best of what Alpena can bring out in people. So Joe is hardworking. He's extremely bright. He's a physics professor at this point in his career, and he, has his master's degree in physics from the University of Maryland. And yet, like many Alpena natives and people even who have been in Alpena for a long time exude, they're very down to earth. Their wisdom and their intelligence is not something that is held above people, but they're very comfortable around lots of different kinds of people. And this is true of Joe as well. So that's what really the book is about overall, learning to love and appreciate Northern Michigan in its many forms. But it's also about this other journey, which is a spiritual one. It's really about how, in my ongoing challenge of keeping my faith as a Jewish woman, a modern practicing Jewish woman, intact in a place where there are not a lot of other Jews. So after being born and raised and spending the first 20 years of my life in Houston, I landed by way of Alpena, right? Because my dad accepted that position at Alpena Community College. And I met Joe. We eventually landed in Mason County, Michigan, which I've lived in Michigan long enough to know that you're supposed to do this when you show people where you live. So we live on the west side. It's a beautiful area. It's touristy, but the town in the county that I live in is called Ludington. And it's very similarly sized to Alpena, although it has a very different kind of economy, an economy that's much more based around tourism, though I understand that that's something that Alpena is actively growing. But I don't live inside Ludington, right? So Richard mentioned earlier, he lives in Havard Lake, that it takes him about 30 minutes to get into Alpena. It's a little bit similar to me where I live. I live inland. I don't live on the edge of a lake. I live across from a cherry orchard, but I live on 4 acres and on a dirt road. And so very, very different from Houston, right? And the special thing about the property that I moved to is it's called Replica Dodge. It's on 4 acres. And the person who lived here before me was obsessed with Gunsmoke, and he built a full city, and I can see it right outside my window right now, or what is left of it, of Dodge City, Kansas in its heyday. So there was a saloon, there was a general mercantile, there was a church and a little schoolhouse. And so part of the book is like, who's crazier, the person who builds that, right, in their front lawn in Michigan, where it maybe doesn't belong, or the people who come along and say, yeah, we'll buy all of that. So there's that literal journey happening, booming city to quiet country, deep south to rural north, but there's also this spiritual journey going on because in Houston, Texas, I grew up in a Southern Baptist family, but I have since, through a multi-year effort, converted to Reform Judaism. So it takes a lot of work to become Jewish. You can't just say, I've decided to become Jewish and say a certain prayer and then you're welcomed into a community. You have to prove time and again that you will show up, that you are committed to Judaism, that you are committed to continuing to learn and to express Jewish values, and that you will raise your children Jewishly, all of which I committed to. And then I, very soon after that, landed in Mason County. So big questions drive this memoir, and I'm getting to the end here of my introduction, and then I'll do some reading. Questions of belonging and unbelonging, which is sort of a phrase that I've invented because I have yet to come across a word that more succinctly sums up an experience of feeling entirely out of place, but yet you've got to stay there, right? So questions about what it means to be at home in a place or with a person, right? Because we don't just define home in terms of a single place, but we often say, it's at a marriage ceremony, it's not uncommon to hear people say, you are my home, right? So belonging to a place, to a person, even to an idea or a set of spiritual values. Because when you really think about it, and here's my biggest point, right? Belonging to a person, to a place, to an idea, to a set of spiritual values can be a powerful force of good in a person's life. But the thing about life, and what makes it beautiful and complicated and challenging and rewarding, is that it is constantly changing, right? So I think about this now in even completely new terms since the pandemic came along, how we're all forced to try to build a new home and a new sense of normal within the pandemic, within the all of the constraints that are happening right now in our society. So the plain fact of the matter is we're never at home in every aspect of our life. There's always something up in the air. And certainly for all of us right now, one of those things is COVID. But that's really where this memoir begins, right? Obviously it predates COVID, but it gets at the same kinds of questions. How do I make meaning? Who am I in this new place, in this new routine? How can I continue doing the things that are meaningful to me and that contribute to my sense of well-being and peace? So it has been a journey, geographically, spiritually, culturally. And so these are the kinds of the things that I'm hoping you'll keep in mind as you listen to this short excerpt that I'm going to read from Welcome to Replica Dodge. If you have the book in front of you, I'm just going to start on page 56, about halfway down. The chapter that I'm reading from is called Welcome to Alpena. And one of the cool things about this book, and I can show you really quick, is that each chapter has an illustration, and those illustrations are done by my amazingly talented cousin, who is also getting her career off to a start as an illustrator. And I'll try to, make it as big as possible here. As you can see, this is the one for Alpena, and this is actually the part of the chapter that I'm going to read to you. There's me at the top of the hill, and it's Manning Hill, and there's Joe at the bottom. So this is my first date with Joe Grochowski, product of Alpena, symbol of Alpena in so many ways, the best of what the town has to offer. Over the coming months, however, something happened. Back in Houston, I became more confident on my own, and maybe this is what made my attitude toward Alpena soften at the edges, that even as I grew more confident, I still missed my family so much that I began looking forward to those puddle jumper trips. Taking the puddle jumper out of Detroit meant being close to my mother, my father, and my sister again. Almost a year later, the following December, Joe approached me at an Alpena Community College basketball game I attended with my dad. I was surprised by how glad I was to see him again. His canvas pants and beautiful face, his snow boots on the verge of holes. He invited me to go midnight sledding with him. So, I thought, not completely flavorless. Nobody had ever invited me to go sledding before, let alone at midnight. Earlier in the chapter, I talk a little bit about how I had assigned this, unfairly, I had assigned this term to Alpena, flavorless, right? So Houston was full of flavor, full of lots of different kinds of people. And when I arrived in Alpena, it was the middle of March, and everything was pretty gray, and I saw a lot of white people. So I started talking about it being completely flavorless. But when Joe approached me and asked me to do this interesting thing, it started to seem like there was more to the town. Joe told me to meet him at a place called Kramer's Truck Stop, and I tried to mask my cringe. A truck stop seemed an odd place to meet for a first date, but Joe didn't seem to register this. Either he didn't know about the unspoken norms of the dating world, or he didn't care about them, but either way, I was curious. Kramer's was closed when I arrived, and I stood in the freezing dark. I began to consider how little I knew about Joe, this person I was meeting alone. I looked ridiculous in the giant yellow snowsuit I had pulled over my clothes. But then Joe was there, pulling up in a beat-up Buick Regal. He leaned over and swung the door open. In the glow of the car's overhead light, he grinned. Hey. His teeth were crooked and jammed together, but he was striking. We drove to a hill far outside of town. We parked, and Joe turned the car lights on to illuminate the high-sloped snow. Then we hiked up. At the top of Manning Hill, Joe showed me how to give a running start before jumping on the sled, and I managed to tuck myself in just before it careened downward. When I think about that night now, I remember the speed of the sled. It was incredibly fast. It felt dangerous whipping in and out of the car's lights with the dark trees on either side of us. I remember the fresh snow churning up in my face as we hurtled downhill. It was freezing, but after hiking up the hill a second time, I started to sweat under my snowsuit. I wriggled out of it, getting down to my jeans and sweater as Joe retrieved a second sled. I remember we didn't talk much, but when we did, I was at the top of the hill and Joe was at the bottom, and we were hollering over the wind and trees in this empty, sublime place that swallowed one's voice and returned nothing but more dark and cold. The dates I went on in Houston with guys from the city, poetry readings, patio dining, tango lessons, suddenly seemed dwarfed by these Michigan excursions with Joe. From then on, most of the things we found to do were free or low cost and usually involved being out in nature. A walk to the local dam or duck sanctuary, maybe, or just hanging out at one of our houses. During the summer months, there was volleyball at the beach with his small circle of friends. Falling asleep one night with liquor in my veins, sand in my swimsuit, I finally admitted to myself that there could, just possibly, be something to glean from the tiny town of Alpena. It wasn't Houston. It wasn't home. But at the very least, there was Joe, the physics major. As the youngest of 5 children born into a Catholic family, Joe had spent his childhood among horses, turkeys, and dogs with fur like wild boar. His father was in building maintenance, his mother a part-time caretaker for the disabled. He still lived with his parents on some cedar-rich acreage just outside of Alpena in the small house his father and uncles had built with their own hands. After graduating from high school, he had done his first 2 years at the local community college, eventually transferring to Michigan Tech. This history produced a blend of hardscrabble values in Joe that seemed to alternately deride and scaffold the future he was, even then, scrambling toward, one in higher education. Something strong in him also struggled against the academic life, the one I had always known as the daughter of a professor. Years later, after he'd secured a tenure-track position, I noticed that whenever anyone asked Joe what he did for a living, he would respond flatly, "I teach," rather than "I'm a professor." "Why do you do this?" I asked one night. He winked. "Everyone hates professors," he said. Thank you. And now I'm happy to answer questions.
If you would like to ask questions, make a comment, please unmute your microphone and talk to Natalie and the rest of us. Thank you.
I hope I didn't talk for too long.
Well said, Natalie. Just as well said as you write. Beautiful. So how have you adjusted to life in Replica Dodge? Because that's just as remote as Alpena.
Yes, so that's an ongoing effort. I would say I'm pretty well brainwashed in terms of rural living at this point. I love the fact that I can go for a run in one of the most beautiful parts of America, that I see more animals on a regular basis than I do humans. I mean, people come here to vacation for a reason. And, you know, it's not atypical for me to see things like bald eagles and green herons and kingfishers less than a mile from my home. So in that way, I am very well acclimated. In fact, there are many times when I think, boy, wouldn't it be convenient if we lived a little bit closer to town, and then I'll start, you know, I'll take a glance at the houses that are available. I'll even go as far as drive by them, but in Ludington, but then I always think, no way, these are way too close together. So I think I'm pretty well brainwashed when it comes to rural living. But the thing that is still very much up in the air for me is the idea of performing and coming through and following through on this thing that I have committed to, which is living a Jewish life and raising Jewish children. And my children do know that they are Jewish, but so far it is very much a curious homespun marvel for them. They have not seen a lot of evidence outside of their own home. So that's the thing that is still very much up in the air for me. That's a great question.
Natalie?
Hi, Mom.
Hi. I would like to hear the tale of you flying into Alpena and how it was so different. I think it's a lovely story and so true.
Yes.
Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. So do you want me to read those few paragraphs, or would you like me to talk a little bit about it?
Your choice.
Okay. So I think I'll just talk about it. So of course, I grew up flying in and out of, is it Bush Intercontinental Airport? Am I saying that right, Dad and Mom?
Yes.
So, and we're talking about millions of people who fly in and out of that airport. We're talking about the third most populous city in America. So I was used to 7-layer parking garages and lots of people coming and going in the airport. And when my parents relocated, of course, they went up to Alpena before I did. I had to at least get to spring break at the University of Houston. And I remember calling my mom as I was in the airport in Houston and saying, okay, what gate do you want me to meet you at? And she said, don't worry about it. You'll find us. And I said, well, what do you mean don't worry about it? And she said, you'll see. And so I got on the plane to Detroit, and then I landed in Detroit, and then I got on what's called a puddle jumper, right? At least that's what the person sitting next to me called it. And it was a really loud and cramped plane, and it was really small. And so I felt like I was like in it's like the Alaskan wilderness and with a bush pilot, right? And so that puddle jumper took us the additional hour out of Detroit to Alpena. And I thought, wow, I've never been in a plane this small. There's like not one person of color on the plane, which is also an odd experience. And then at one point, the plane began its descent, and I thought, what's going on? Like, where are we landing? And because to me, it seemed like we were just landing in in a field somewhere. And then, you know, the pilot came on and said, yeah, we're landing in Alpena. And I got off the plane and walked off the plane. And I realized that what was in front of me was this one room airport, you know, and of course I could have easily spotted my mom, and I did. But it was like no other airport I'd ever been in. So it was just that was my first dose of culture shock when I came to Alpena. Thank you for that question.
Well, I'm curious if you had some friends from the Houston area and family come and visit you in Ludington, or even when they visit in Alpena, what their reaction is to
Sure.
coming to Paradise North, as we call it, where people vacation.
Yeah, well, that is something that immediately stood out to me about Alpena, was just the incredible natural beauty. And I think that's something that other people notice first and foremost. For example, when I grew up with the Gulf of Mexico being the closest beach, and it was brown and muddy and kind of smelled very different. And I'm not just talking about like the smell that the sea naturally has. There was probably some other stuff mixed in as well. You know, it's oil country down there. So when I arrived to Alpena and I saw Lake Huron for the first time, it just took my breath away, how blue. And of course the lake changes throughout the year too. There's a certain point where the lake, at least over here, looks very green almost. And so that took my breath away. And I think other people who have visited the area have remarked on that as well. But they're also quite eager to say something to the effect of, oh, I could never live out here. And so I don't really know what to do with those comments anymore, because I have learned to live in rural Michigan, and I love rural Michigan. But I also do recognize that there are formidable challenges for many people. Maybe I can ask a question to you all. I'm curious to know some of your experiences with Alpena, especially people who are transplants, about your own sense of culture shock, or was that not a part of it for you? So I'm curious to know about your own stories coming to Alpena.
Well, I have one. And that was, I remember coming into town and it was getting close to Thanksgiving, I think. And Lori Sutherland told me, you want to have Thanksgiving with us? And of course that was okay. But she said, now, you will not find anybody else in Alpena to have Thanksgiving with. And I thought, what is it? Why wouldn't they dine with us? And she said, because everybody has family here. They're going to be with their family.
Yeah.
The two of us do not have family here, so we should get together.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Joe has many there are many Grochowskis in the area, and there's something really beautiful about many generations of a family staying in a town. But yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, where you can come in and you feel like everybody else has their people. So
be kind to newcomers.
Yeah, be kind to newcomers is the moral of the story.
Hey, Natalie?
Yeah.
Well, to respond to your question, coming into Alpena for me was just a wonderful experience because I had made the most of Houston everything that it had to offer, but I was at a time in my life when I was ready for something different. Boy, did we get it. And I was very used to moving around because Grandpa was in the Navy as I was growing up. So every year or so we would be in a different place. So that part of it was easy, but really enjoyed the warm reception that I and our family got when we arrived in Alpena. So many people were so gracious to us. I remember a second day there, I was a little befuddled by directions that I had to go somewhere, stop in a store. And the lady behind the counter, actually, she knew who I was. And she explained to me that, well, when the town was laid out by its founders, the story is that they were not sober when they designed how the streets would go. That was funny. But, and the other
could well be, you know.
The other thing is the difference of just public safety. I came from a college that had 4 or 5 full-time campus officers, licensed police officers, and a slew of part-timers, at least 2 officers on duty 24 hours a day. There had been some serious crime on the campus which warranted all that protection. And I was first day in the office, I was going over the departments and the personnel lists, and I asked Lee Sprague, my executive assistant, well, what about the campus police force? And she laughed at me and said, oh, this is Alpena. We don't need one. The sheriff's office is catty corner to the campus, and the public safety office is less than a mile away. And I was flabbergasted. And then I asked people, well, do you need to lock your doors in your house? Nah, not really. The only reason to do it is you might have a person who's had a little too much to drink at night, confusing your house for his, and he might come in and flop down on your sofa. He's not going to do any harm. Just wake him up in the morning and the right direction. So those
that did end up happening to us, right?
I think so, yes.
Yes.
I came home late one night from work around 9:30. Mom had already gone upstairs to bed, and I started getting ready for bed, and then I hear these footsteps downstairs, and I run down there to see who's in our house. By that time the person had gone, but the covers on that guest bed in the front room were mussed up. Mom told me, no, I haven't taken a nap there.
Wow.
Natalie?
Yeah.
Also, one more thing, talking about wildlife, maybe you could tell the story of the foxes that you showed me.
Foxes. Oh, right down the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a fox den right down the road. Yeah, so we have a fox den right down the road from where I'm living right now, and it's just a hole in the ground, and then the other entrance to it is way out in the field, which is amazing. But I was telling my dad, I know she's a good mom because it seems like every other day there's some giant animal that's been slaughtered just sitting outside. The remnants of, it's after a while when you live in rural Michigan, like dead animals don't they are just a fact of life here. So I've been thinking about what a good mother she is, and I finally got a chance the other day to see her little fox kits out in the road, but very cute. So that's just a kind of an everyday experience that I have living in rural Michigan. I think somebody else had a question.
Natalie?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I enjoyed your book thoroughly. I read it about a year ago, and you were so descriptive. You really opened up about your personal life and family, and it's just, I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I hope you'll write another.
Oh, me too.
And the one thing that we moved up from the lower part of Michigan up here about 25 years ago now. And I found such a warm, welcoming community. And then when we developed our all group, it just showed what the community, all the people that we have that come and speak and participate, and the generosity of the college to give us a place to have our meetings. I just feel it's all wrapped up in one. People will say, well, what do you do up here?
Yeah.
And we don't have any problem keeping ourselves busy, but people don't knock on the door. You have to get out there and,
Yes.
you know, make friends. But
Yes.
it's been a wonderful experience for us living up here as well.
Right. In the South, people do knock on your door. They will come right up and start a conversation. Even people at a gas station will reach out and are extra friendly. But you're right. There is a real warmth to Alpena, and there's a real, at times daunting, but really beautiful and generous way of living in a community where you recognize people over and over again, and you say, oh, hello. And you're constantly put in these situations where if you're interested in something and somebody else is interested in something, it's a small enough community that you're going to see that person again and again. And that friendship is going to get its chance to get going. So that's, it has its own way of behaving, but you're right. It's warm and friendly. Thank you so much for reading the book. I'm hoping to write another one, but I'm not sure if my kids are ever going to go back to school. So.
I think all the book clubs up here have read your book.
Oh, great.
Well, I want to say one other thing that I really appreciated about Alpena, and that was its safety. You could go out and you could walk the streets at night.
Yeah.
You didn't have to take special precautions. Your kids can go out and play. In Houston, your kids couldn't just go outside.
Yeah.
And play. And when you went somewhere, you had to take very special precautions. But I felt very comfortable even getting out and walking in the evening or night.
Yeah. One of the things that we've talked about is before is that in ways that are both positive in terms of what you're talking about, Mom, and negative. There's something about coming into Alpena that feels like walking into America 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
And
in the 1950s.
Yeah. And that has positive, experiences associated with it, and then also very difficult experiences for people I know as well.
Well, it also it has many offerings with excellent plays, the Brown Trout Festival. So there is quite a bit to do that I found, and at the college.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions about the book, my work as an author, publication, anything along those lines? Or would you like to speak to my husband, right? Who is an Alpena native?
I have a question, Natalie. This is Jodine.
Hi, Jodine. How are you doing?
Hi there. I also love your book and have purchased it and given it to friends, and really can't say enough good about it. But I wondered what ways you have found to utilize to teach your children regarding Judaism.
That's a wonderful question because it's one that I think about all the time. So one of the things we do is we say the Shema every night, which is it's an in many ways, it represents the heart of Judaism. It is probably the most important prayer, and we say it together at the end of the day in Hebrew, right? And then I translate it into English. So Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, God is our God, God is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever. It's a very simple and beautiful prayer. And then we kind of do some praying around that. So thinking about what we're grateful for, thinking about ways that we can maybe improve the next day and be better human beings. So that's one important way. I often, when they were babies, I would sing to them in Hebrew because I want them. We are not in the habit yet of driving the long distance every week to synagogue, right? But I want them to recognize and hear the Hebrew language often. So that's one way that we do. We are connecting with Judaism. Another way is that we do celebrate holidays. So we celebrate Hanukkah and we commemorate Passover. And so we have our own traditions surrounding that. Rivka, my daughter, it was in kindergarten last year, and I went in and read to her class about Hanukkah. So those are some of the ways, but they still don't. I mean, they don't regularly hang out with other kids that are Jewish. They know that they are Jewish. I think it's a point of pride for them. But they don't have the experience of being with other Jewish kids often. So, but that's a great question. Okay, Richard, I'm not sure if you want to call it, if nobody else has any other questions.
Well, Natalie, I have kind of an off-the-wall question. Did the Replica Dodge used to have a sign out on US 31 as invite the public to it?
You know, not to my knowledge, although knowing the guy who built it, it wouldn't surprise me if that had been there at some point.
After you describing this, I have some childhood memory of driving on US 31, and there was a sign and so forth pointing back to Dodge City or something like that.
Huh. No, I mean that's
this was a long time ago.
Yeah, so the Replica Dodge in my front yard was built in 1995. So
oh no,
were you a child then?
No, that's not it then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Natalie?
I just have one. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Jodine.
I just wanted to say that just listening to you, you're so vivacious. It makes me feel, and probably everyone listening, that I just want to sit down with a cup of coffee or tea with you and just talk. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, and I'm, this is like I said, I'm learning how to do all of this Zoom stuff, and it's very different. I would actually much rather be meeting with you all in a room, and I would love to get a cup of tea with you, Jodine, when I am back in Alpena, when it's safe, right? Whenever that happens. But yeah, I'm just so thankful for these moments as an author, as a first-time author. So I try to be fully present. And so I'm so grateful that everybody was here today.
I'd like to make a comment. I'm the other half of Wanda's on behalf. I want to thank Dr. Joynton because he and his wife are the ones who started this. Like most people, they start a legacy, and Dr. Joynton has done that by moving into Alpena. And here you are, how many years later, talking about a book that you had written, and my wife has written, and Jodine. Read, I'm sorry. So I want to thank Dr. Joynton and his wife for making this pilgrimage to this small town. We live out in Hillman, so we're
okay.
Yeah, so we're a 60-mile trip every time we come into Alpena. So,
Yeah.
but we've done that sometimes twice and 3 times in a day because of what's there. So,
You're welcome,
Hey.
Bob, and we count it as a real privilege to have had a part in life in Alpena.
yeah, and the All group, one was one of the originals going back, and there's lots of folks listening that are participating in this that fall into that category. But it's been a real catalyst.
I got to remember the time that 15 years ago or 20. Yeah, about 15 years ago, ALL was short on funds. What are we going to do? And I said, how about I cook a spaghetti dinner. And that went well enough, I guess. And then Denny Dobeck told me, all right, Olin, that's the first annual.
That's right.
We're going strong, right?
Yep. When you volunteer for something, it's the first annual.
Yes.
So. And Dick, thank you Richard, thank you for setting up the Zoom thing. It's way over way over my head. But thanks again, and thank you for Natalie for talking about your book and your family. I've been coming up in the Alpena area for probably 60 years, so
Wow.
I've got a lot of things going on out in the Hillman area that I've experienced, and Alpena has been just an addition, a great addition to our life and our experience in the area. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Well, I got a husband out of the deal, right? That I'm still happy with today. So we've been married, let's see, 7 years. So I'm so happy that my parents moved up there, not only because I met Joe, but just because what a game changer, right? As only Alpena can be. So thank you so much for being here today. And thanks again, Richard. And please express my thanks to Florence for encouraging me to present today.
I know Florence would like to be here, but she's camping for, as she told me, this is her 70th year of going to Interlochen State Park or something like that. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyways, she'll be anxious to see the video, so I have to go work on that when we're done here.
Okay.
I'm sure she'll be in communication with you. And for those of you who are online, if you didn't catch Natalie's email address, just send a request to all at alpenacc.edu, and we'll make sure you get a copy of it. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much.
We'll sign off the Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.